All those in favour? Yes.
Aye.
I think we've got that.
Item 10.
Right. Ed. Right, we're going on to item 11, the approval of the Auckland Regional Amenities Funding Act. I'm assuming there will be no... Councillor Cooper has moved, seconded by Councillor Simpson. Eddie, is there anything you want to add? Candice, is there anything you want to add on behalf of the board?
I think it's all self-explanatory in the interests of time and everybody's lunch. Unless there are any questions, I'd be delighted to respond.
No, there are no questions. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? There's no one, clearly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank the board as well, Vernon and Anita on the board. Thank you. Right, racing along. Dr. Randall, Mr. Corbyn. Oh, they're coming up. They should come up as well, I think, to the table. Yep. And Sudan. Yes. Yes, by all means. Yes, come up, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and honourable councillors. Once again, we appreciate being here to support the resolutions you have in front of you. May I just say, by way of introduction, the role of the RFA is merely to hopefully negotiate an appropriate sum between the aspirations and the wish of both MOTAT and Auckland War Memorial Museum, and of course the desire of council to keep a definite limit on any rate increases. I hope that the figure before you reasonably reflects that, and entirely up to yourself to ask any questions you may wish. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Randall, do you want to say anything?
I will briefly. My name's William Randall. I'm the chair of the Auckland War Memorial Museum, and with me from our team are the deputy chair, Brian Corbin, who I think most of you know, and our director of collections and research, who is also the acting director for the acting director for the acting for the new director, who is due to come in tomorrow. As many of you may know, the new director's name is an individual by the name of David Gamester. David comes from the University of Glasgow in Scotland and runs the oldest museum in Scotland. He's an interesting follow-on from Roy Clare, who we've had for the last 6 years, who did and made monumental changes internally to the management and treatment of people as an asset of the museum, and it's shown itself quite admirably in what we refer to as Future Museum, which is the 20-year plan. I thought if it's safe to assume that all of you have read the annual plan, and considering the time constraints that we have, I think it might be more appropriate in reading the papers here that we open it up for questions. But before we do that, maybe, David, you'd want to just give a quick dashboard of the highlights of the last year, and then we can go to questions.
Sure, thank you, William. So my name is David Reeves. As William said, I'm the Director of Collections at the museum. This year ahead is one that we'll be focusing on some major building redevelopments and content renewal in the museum. The first gallery of which opened in November last year, the new Memorial Inquiry Centre. Another gallery will open in October this year, and there'll be further developments opening in early 2018. Many museums around the world would close for a number of years to do these scale of renovations, but we've elected to stay open because we believe very passionately in continuing to develop and to deliver value to Aucklanders. This last year we've exceeded over 50,000 engagements off-site in activities such as contributions to Polyfest, work with the city libraries and other community outreach activities. We have collaborated with a number of the organisations that you've already heard from this morning. Successful exhibitions have included the Air New Zealand 75th anniversary volume, The History of Making Music in New Zealand, and most recently the very successful opening of Being Chinese in Aotearoa. We now have over 1 million collection records available online, and they're being used worldwide. So as well as the intrinsic informational value of these collections online, they also put Auckland up on the world stage. In June this year, we'll complete the restoration of the Wharenui Hotanui, which has involved community engagement with expert weavers from around New Zealand, working alongside our own conservators. And the final project I just want to mention is our Pacific Collections Access project, which has seen a number of community groups invited into the museum to share their knowledge and with traditional techniques and to allow us to rehouse and re-describe the collections for huge increase in both online engagement and connection with communities. So with over 890,000 visits this last year, that has been a huge success for us. But importantly, I'd like to impress on you that to be a 21st century museum, it's not just about on-site visits and foot traffic through the door. It's about the journey we're on to become both a place that people come to, but also a place that things happen from. So with that, I will pause there and be happy to take questions.
Eddie, is there anything you would like to add?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Report?
Thank
No?
you.
Okay. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, just got one question, and first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the outstanding contribution that the museum makes. I note in your achievements for 2015-2016 that there was a 4% increase in visitation on the previous year, and that's great. I just make the observation that for me, a visit to the Auckland Museum is probably one of the outstanding things for any tourist to Auckland. And I just wonder how the 4% increase measures up with the visitations to Auckland, and just how much of that incoming tourism you're capturing. Because even on a short stay, I'd suggest it's possible to make a visit to the museum.
Our TripAdvisor tells us that we are the #1 man-made attraction by tourists to Auckland. We've also got a very active program working with the inbound tourist market, particularly the cruise ship industry, and we have regular program and a steady stream of buses from the waterfront up to the museum, and that 1 hour, 45 minutes or so visit is often a real highlight for those visitors who are in Auckland for perhaps less than a day.
Could I add to that and just also point to the fact that there is a considerable investment that we've put into the digital side of the museum, and that's viewed as extremely important for engaging not only those people who are unlikely to make it into the museum, but engaging a youth set who would be more likely to access via a phone or an iPad the information in a form that's suitable to them.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, firstly to William and David, thank you for the work that you do, and Brian Corbyn as a member of the board, and Sir Don from RFA. Our paper here describes you as a world-class cultural institution. I think that's an apt description, and we're very proud of the institution. I've got a couple of questions arising out of the content of the report in front of us. The first relates to quite a big investment you've made in staffing, because your staffing costs gone up in double digits for each of the last 3 or 4 years, and that's another $5.5 million. So my first question is, what was the nature of that investment that leads to those extra costs? And the second question, so I've got them both on the table. I think you're about to spend $56.8 million in a capital projects in the next 3 years. Is the planning for that capital development, it's an awful amount of money, awfully large amount of money, are those projects on track, and are you capable of delivering those as you hope?
To take the question about staffing, the museum's current staffing sits, permanent staffing sits at 183 FTE. It is true that in the last few years we have taken on a number of fixed-term staff in the planning for the gallery redevelopments, but also importantly, as William has alluded to, the digitisation of the collections. So that's not just taking digital images, it's also housing them, it's conserving them where that's been needed. It's been working particularly with Māori and Pacific communities to understand more about our collections and to get that material out online, but also importantly to develop programs. So the increase in costs is very much around increasing the engagement with collections and the preparatory work required to make a really good spend of the... It's quite a number of years, many of you will know, since we had really substantial redevelopment of the galleries within the museum. And I mentioned the first of those, which has just reopened, and the program rolling out, to your second question, is well planned. It's been, the cost analysis has been gone over with a fine-tooth comb, and we've scheduled that very carefully over the next 3 and then further out to 5 and 7 years to make sure that it's a coordinated spend. The pattern in the past, some of you who will know the museum well, has been over a period of time to rotate and say the Oceans Gallery gets replaced with an Oceans Gallery. An Applied Arts Gallery gets replaced with an Applied Arts Gallery. With this pause that we've had over the last 8 or so years, we've been able to take the opportunity to completely reconceive the way we thread the narratives through the building. So it's quite a massive change, and that is causing the need to move things about, but to do it properly and within, as I say, a coordinated program. So I'm confident that we're delivering, and the team are already on board working to that end. Thank you.
Your Worship, I mean, I'd like to add to that if I could, because I think if we go back to Sir Don's time at the helm at the museum, the process started then to look holistically at the museum and where it needed to go to be future-proofed. And that involved talking to an awful lot of stakeholders, both internally and externally, and eventuated in something that we refer to as Future Museum, for those of you who are new to the Council. The Future Museum concept is a 20-year project that is designed around 3 phases. The first phase are those projects that were considered paramount and of immediate need. And they include such things as north-south access via boulevards that connect the 2 entrances to the museum. There were many who, when questioned, had the notion that, in fact, they were in a different museum if they came in from the north and ended up in the south. So this way has a way of coordinating the storylines through the museum, both vertically and horizontally. The second phase were the would like to haves but don't have the funding for it, and the third phase were the dream type material. So we, as a board, would not authorize any funding that wasn't secure. So the funding is secure for the first phase of this. That's what we are looking for currently, and it necessarily curtailed spending until such time as we had a holistic view of what needed to be done. I would finish this comment by the I guess the fact that future funding for phases 2 and 3 are in line with what we are now referring to as the Auckland Museum Foundation. Foundation has the goal of raising a considerable amount of money to fund the ongoing capital needs of this museum.
Ms. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the work that the museum's doing. It's a great asset to our region. Look, I've got my question is for Edward and to the museum. It's really ascertaining to the comment in paragraph number 22. So to you, Edward, first, you've said officials have some concerns about the level of clarity provided to council about how ratepayer money is spent. How come you've got those concerns? And then the second question to the museum is, why aren't you upfront and telling us how ratepayer money is spent directly? What's the problem?
Through the chair, I think it's simply that over the last few years, there are these large capital plans, but we, as officials, haven't had sufficient information to really know exactly what projects that money's being spent on.
And to the museum, why don't you provide that information?
If I can, I'll start
Noting
that.
you're brand new and never done this before. You
I'm-
might change it all.
I'm surprised about the comment, to be frank about it. I think that one of the things that has characterized not only the board, but the culture inside this museum is one of openness. The invitation has been consistently in front of not only the RFA, but any council member that wanted to come over and for that matter, go for a tour of the catacombs if you want. But in terms of information, you're welcome to talk to the auditors, to our finance staff, anyone. There is nothing to
Reading
hide.
the officer report, just commenting on it. It may change, thank you.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two questions. One is I'm just interested if the museum has any reserves, cash reserves, and if so, how much that might be. And also, in terms of any of the programs that get run, do you go through kind of cost-benefit analysis at all? Is that part of the psyche of the management of it, or is that not done or not appropriate? I'll just be curious about what happens in that area of management, please.
So if I answer your second question first, cost benefit is absolutely part of our balancing of the budget when we look at what the community outcomes and benefits will be of any particular program. We are a near encyclopedic museum, so we aim to address many audiences over the course of a year. And something that is very much part of our future museum philosophy is trying to leverage the effort. So the same project might have an on-site component as well as an off-site component programmed in the community and an on-site component. So it's a way of making better use of the same intellectual effort behind an idea. Several years ago, the example of the Moana My Ocean exhibition, which also had an online app and also had a program out in schools. So it's a way of ensuring we're maximising the benefit from any one particular spend. And that analysis happens for each project, where we look at who are all of the possible audiences for a particular idea or narrative or an issue that needs to be addressed, and looking at what's the best way that we can reach the maximum audience through a variety of channels.
That's very helpful. So do you have a certain threshold number that you would perhaps can a program on if it didn't reach a certain ratio? Do you operate
It's
that
very
way?
hard because the quality and impact of a program is not, as I mentioned before, not just about numbers through the door. We actually want to understand better the social impact. So something, say, like our urban youth program, which we select only 12 youth who've come from a variety of disadvantaged backgrounds. They will spend a number of days in the museum. That's quite a high investment for us, but the quality and the feedback that comes from those young people is enormous. How we put a particular number on that, it's hard to say.
Okay, thank you. And to the first question about the
First
reserves?
question, William?
In the executive
In terms
summary,
of-
number 5.
A lot. Multi-millions.
What do you,
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor
Yeah.
Watson.
Thank you. And again, like some other councillors, just picking up on some of the comments in the report, particularly this example that's given here in point 26 to do with the temporary storage facility there, the $8 million one, and really just seeking a little bit more information about that, and whether there's a return at some point on this site that's being used, and how it would mesh in on something a little bit more permanent that might perhaps go across the area as a whole. You got any sort of brief summation of that?
Sure. It's a necessary enabling work, because as anybody who has lived through a renovation of their home, you need to move some things about in order to make a difference at the main museum site. So this 3,500 square metre very high spec warehouse is enabling us to do that. It's possible that the author of the report was unaware of the conversations that we've been having with the Maritime Museum, with the Auckland Art Gallery, with Auckland Libraries, and with one other potential partner to share that space with us. And just in recent weeks, it's looking as though 2 of those partners will in fact be sharing that space with us over the first 7 years. We have a 15-year lease on the property, and we've judged that that represents very good value for what it enables us to do at the museum site. It's also an experience where we can learn from that, and that will inform future decisions that council may wish to make about a longer term solution, a more permanent solution for collection facilities throughout the region.
And Councillor Wasserman, in item 21, which is the Auckland Major Cultural Heritage Institutions Independent Review, that's one of the issues that would be looked at is effectively storage facilities. As we know, Te Papa is also interested in putting a facility like that in Auckland. Councillor Cooper.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I had the same questions around the storage facilities, but thank you for the work you're doing. But I just, one of my concerns is, I mean, 30.7 million is a big chunk of ratepayers' money, and I know we don't really have a say over it, but the Mayor's promised a 2.5 rate increase, and here we have 3% and ongoing in the budgets here. Was there any consideration to the fact that the council are having to shave and shave and shave and possibly affect a lot of our basic infrastructure delivery, that it might be 2.5 in your area as well?
So the 3% is made up of around 2%, which is ongoing operational increases. The additional 1% is for some essential works where we have identified the need to get on with a program of returning Koiu tangata, Maori human remains. And on the back of the Pacific Collections Access Project, we've identified a need for additional engagement with Pacific communities and costs of health and safety recent legislation, particularly around our handling of hazardous goods. Those are additional costs that we feel we must get on with.
I understand the health and safety, but I mean, I guess it's like everybody, you have to look at what is absolutely necessary. The other question was, there's a comment here in 15, and I look at the other revenue, and it's pretty static really over the time, but it says, oh, the council levy will have to go up because basically it looks like it's pretty static, about 100,000 extra a year, not even that in some cases for other revenue. And I mean, I just note there's small organisations, for example, West Auckland Hospitals has to raise $4 million a year itself. It's only about 50% funded, and from a community that doesn't have the kind of access that maybe the museum does. And so that's why I'm wondering, at 8.4 is actually not a huge ask when you think of some communities, what they have to raise, and you have access to very rich people quite often, whereas other communities don't. So I'm just wondering why it's such a small increase each year at other revenue.
That's partly what has driven us to establish the Museum Foundation, to start tapping into those alternative sources, philanthropic trusts and private individuals, and we're seriously on that path. Our experience looking at other organisations is that those foundations take a while to establish themselves before the money starts coming in. You have to build a track record and some confidence with those communities, and so that's definitely part of our future strategy.
Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Thanks. I'm interested in your engagement with Pacific communities. Is that, I don't know if the comment you made about staffing increases was directly related to that or in some part related to that. Just wondering what's going on in that space and if there was any research or some kind of public engagement that was going on with Pacific communities.
So the public engagement is in the form of, it has been for a number of years, engagement at festivals such as Pacifica and Polyfest, but more recently on the back of the collections project that I described, we're seeing a far greater interest from Pacific communities wanting to engage with the museum. They are regularly coming in. In fact, we had a really lovely story of 2 women who came in as part of the Pacific collection project who we discovered on the day had funded themselves to fly from the Cook Islands because they had heard what a great program it was through their networks. They came just for a weekend to come and share their knowledge with us around traditional weaving techniques. Now, that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the word of mouth in their respective communities. And so we feel really quite encouraged by that. And we're only 1 year into that project. It's a three and a half year project, and we're just beginning to see it really grow.
Thanks. And just my other questions to our officer, Chair. Point 28, Council may wish to consider how improved arrangements. I know that carries on from other points. I was wondering if any preliminary work or thought has gone into what those improved arrangements might look like.
Councillor, through the Chair, as the Chair said, item 21 on the agenda will deal with some of that, and I wouldn't want to speculate on what the end result of that review process might be.
Thanks. Thank you.
Right, any further comments, Don, Brian? Oh, sorry, Mike, I did have you there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, and congratulations on the museum's performance. In terms of the accounts and costs of activities, may I suggest that the categories be a little bit more explicit and perhaps a little less lyrical in terms of the categories? That's the first point. And the second point is the museum aware of the new Parnell station and the opportunities that presents to the museum with very rapid connections to the central city, but also to the south and west?
Certainly, through the Chair. Councillor, yes, we are absolutely aware of the new station. In fact, I went there at lunchtime yesterday myself, and I can report that it is 9 minutes and 33 seconds to get from the platform to the front steps of the museum.
Could you be more precise? It took me 7.
But that's certainly an opportunity that we're well aware of, and we'll be looking, working, of course, with our colleagues who manage the domain around signage and pathways and so forth.
It will grow in importance. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. You can stay. We will do MOTAT now, and then we're actually going to bring item 21 up to after MOTAT, and then that will clean it all up. I know, Brian, you have to go to catch a plane, but the others can stay if you so wish. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.